In London, just outside the walls of the Tower of London, is a memorial. On top of the hill that overlooks the River Thames is a plaque that marks the spot where hundreds of people had their heads cut off during the medieval, Tudor and later time periods. Tower Hill was where serious criminals along with some of the most famous people in society were killed. Join us today as we look at the hill where hundreds of heads were cut off, Tower Hill, and remember to support our channel. As always, please subscribe. Tower Hill is known today for its location as it's close to the Tower of London and it's a transport hub for the Underground in the DLR. Thousands of passengers pass through Tower Hill each day and are probably unaware that they are commuting past a place where hundreds of people were beheaded in horrific fashion. In London there were many different execution sites. Firstly, commoners were hanged at Tyburn, on the Tyburn Tree and then at Newgate, and people were also burned at the stake for religious crimes at Smithfield, not too far from Tower Hill. Executions were a public spectacle, and were done in this way to put the public off committing crimes or plotting against the King and Queen. The Tower of London was reserved for the executions of those incredibly high-profile members of society. It was later used to execute traitors during the World Wars, but in the Tudor period, only those with special permission were executed in private inside the tower's walls. Queens such as Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, along with Lady Jane Grey, were executed on Tower Green in front of a small and modest crowd. Privacy was seen to have been a prize for the nobility, but this was not the case on Tower Hill. Tower Hill was a convenient place to execute those publicly who had been held inside of the Tower of London. Often prisoners who were kept as prisoner at the Tower were then taken on the short walk to Tower Hill. The most common method of execution there was beheading, but there were other methods used too. Richard White in 1440 was burned at the stake there, and William Collingbourne was hanged, drawn and quartered in 1484 for furthering the cause of Henry Tudor during the reign of Richard III. Further hangings, drawings and quarterings took place, but it was mostly straight-up beheadings that we remember Tower Hill for. In his Victorian book, Walter Thornbury states that Tower Hill, that historical and blood-stained ground to the northwest of the Tower, sometimes a large plot of ground, now greatly straitened by encroachments for gardens and houses. Upon this hill is always prepared, as the charges of the city, a large scaffold and gallows of timber for the execution of such traitors or transgressors as they are delivered out of the Tower, or otherwise to the Sheriff of London by writ there to be executed. The scaffold was used to execute state criminals and was found north of Tower Street. During the reign of Edward IV, the scaffold was created permanently, and it took the lives in the Tudor period of such incredible people. During the reign of Henry VIII, we associate it most notably with the execution of high-profile members of government and the aristocracy. When Henry split from the Catholic Church, he ordered all of the clergy and his closest advisers to accept him as the supreme head of the Church of England. This led to some of his closest friends being taken to the Tower of London for their insolence and rejection of the king as the head of the church. One of these men was Sir Thomas More, the former Lord Chancellor to the king. Thomas More himself was executed for this fact, after attempts to get him to accept Protestantism failed. It was said, when he was led to the scaffold on Tower Hill, that the site was in much disrepair, and almost broke, such was the furore around particularly More's execution. It was on this scaffold that the heads of influential Bishop John Fisher was also taken, as well as the head of Thomas Cromwell, the king's closest adviser and friend, who fell from grace following Henry's failed marriage to Anne of Cleves. One of the first names on the memorial at Tower Hill notes Simon Sudbury and his death. Sudbury was the Archbishop of Canterbury during the Peasants' Revolt, when a mass revolt took place inside of the capital. He was located after the rebels stormed and ransacked the Tower of London and was dragged out to Tower Hill. Up upon the site, his head was hacked from his body in around 8 hacks of a sword, with Sudbury becoming one of the most high-profile victims of the Peasants' Revolt. So 200 years roughly before Henry's era, the site was being used for bloody practices. Things continued in the following centuries, with James Tyrrell, the former friend of Richard III, who claimed to have murdered the Prince in the Tower, being killed on Tower Hill. During the reigns of Edward VI and Mary I, more were executed there. Especially during Edward's reign, the shocking execution of Lord Protector Edward Seymour occurred on Tower Hill, in which the man who was practically running England whilst the king was too young was hacked to death on the scaffold. During Mary I's reign, it was used as a site to execute Lord Guildford, the young husband of Lady Jane Grey, Mary's major Protestant rival to the throne. From her room inside the Tower of London, Lady Jane looked ominously at the headless corpse of her husband, who had been executed north of the tower, and she screamed. However, the 9-day Queen was spared the public execution herself. It was during the Duke of Monmouth's execution that the site of Tower Hill became a horrific scene of almost an uprising and a mob. Jack Ketch, the infamous executioner, was performing the Duke of Monmouth's execution that day in 1685. However, Ketch performed his office poorly, having taken roughly 8 swings of the axe to take off James Scott's head. The crowd was so disgusted at this that they almost ripped Ketch limb from limb, and he had to be taken away under armed guard for his own safety. One of the last executions to take place on Tower Hill was that of Lord Lovat on the 9th of April 1747. During the execution, a scaffold holding around 1,000 people on it fell near to Barking Alley overlooking Tower Hill, and in the chaos 12 people were killed, and Lovat seemed to enjoy the downfall of the crowd whilst facing his own death. There was a site close to the public execution spot where lesser public humiliation occurred, such as using the pillory. However, executions did also take place there on Little Tower Hill, with 3 people hanged for murder in 1700. So the area of Tower Hill itself, including the Tower of London, has been synonymous with torture, suffering and punishment for centuries. Close by is also Smithfield, the site of the public burnings, where martyrs such as Anne Askew were burned to death. Tower Hill saw a huge amount of bloodshed, and the ground runs deep with the blood of centuries of executions, which were performed very darkly for public entertainment. So next time you see Tower Hill on a tube map, or pass through it, think that this place was once famous for death, bloodshed and horror. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.